This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Heretic 2 by Matthew J. DiStefano. Ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about faith? In Heretic 2, I dive into LGBTQ affirmation, rejecting divine violence, and embracing universalism in a bold post-Christian perspective. If you're done with outdated dogma and want a justice-oriented, inclusive view of spirituality, then this book is for you. Get Heretic 2 wherever books are sold and start rethinking faith today. This Choircast podcast is brought to you by High Minds. Join host Andy Colenso and Matthew J. DiStefano as they tackle culture, justice, spirituality, and all the big questions shaping our world. High Minds isn't about talking points or hot takes. It's about deep, insightful conversation that inspires and challenges. Tune in to explore new angles, question the status quo, and elevate your thinking. Listen to High Minds wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Radical Love Life, an ongoing series of conversations with thought leaders exploring faith outside the boxes. Hosted by Mark Dilcomb and Kelly Wilson.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Kelly.
How are you today?
I am freaking awesome.
I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah, as always. Like, you know me, I'm just... So, okay, yes, I realize I have to put a little context after this. There is a very big asterisk on that. Obviously, we don't get into too much politics specifically, but it obviously overlaps with our conversations we have here at Radical Love Life.
Yes, totally.
So, yes, I am mostly freaking awesome, although there's a part of me that is lamenting what happened on November 5th. And it's not because the person who I voted for is not the president-elect. It's more than that.
Mhm.
It's really about just where we are in our culture and just all of this. And I'm not worried about tomorrow. Tomorrow's tomorrow, but just right here and now, that's the part where the asterisk comes in, where I'm actually really hurt and angry and for a lot of reasons right now. So I'm processing.
See, I hear you. I'm in that as well. I'm trying to be somewhat stoic about the things that I can't change.
Yeah.
And trying to be aware of the things that I can change, the things that places where I can be helpful. But it is different. I think if I were single and maybe a little younger, I'd be all like, all right, I'm going to fight for justice. And
Yes.
I'm ready for some kind. I even wore my Captain America.
You didn't
know, like, stand for truth. But, as a dad, as a family member, as a member of a community church, as a member of a community where that's very diverse, not only racially, ethnically, but also sexually,
Absolutely.
gender nonconforming, that I feel like I worry for my neighbors.
I do too.
And want to try to do what I can to protect them, but also I can't dwell in the worry so much. I got to take it a day at a time. So that's
I appreciate you saying that, because in 12-step programs, that's one of the things that we hear, right, in the rooms is one day at a time. And there are other things I think about. You can only control yourself. You can't control others. And resentments are like drinking rat poison, expecting the other person to die. Of those that I've heard in the rooms from my sobriety, I'm like, yeah, but they just feel really hollow right now. Right.
Exactly. But yeah, it's a little lot to process.
There's a lot of
I know that there are a lot of people who think like, wow, yeah, we really did a great thing. God is in charge of this, but I feel a little bit betrayed.
Yeah, amen. There's that too. And I'll just put a cap on this as we get to our awesome guest here. But it is also, and I would think our listeners could relate to this, I am angry at some family members as well that I know how they voted, and I'm taking it personally, and I probably shouldn't. In fact, that's unhealthy. Well, it's not for me to judge how I process. There's some resentment about that. And we're going to see each other in Thanksgiving. So it's that old family thing, like, oh boy, I'm like, I've really got to gird myself. And so I will say this. I was listening to some quotes by Bishop Desmond Tutu just as I was driving here to the studio. And it's like, okay, those are the things I'm going to have to do. And I'm going to have to swim a lot, which is where I meditate. And I will just have to do a lot of self-care. And so that I can work through this. And I say this to anybody that feels similar to me. You got to own the anger and whatever other feelings that we have because of what happened, but find a healthy way in which to process these. You can't deny them. They're not going to go away. So I would be to bypass them is not a good thing either. So,
No, that's true. That's true. It's good to have the hard conversations, although
Yeah.
it can be difficult.
it is, even with ourselves. So
Yes.
with that, brother, so let's move forward. Let's talk about our awesome guest, Collins, who's joining us again, right?
That's right. That's right. And known as author M.E. Young.
Oh, yes. I was young. I think we let that out in the last episode, but this is part 2 with our conversation with M.E. Young. And I think you have a little bit of bio as well that you're going to share with us, right?
If you give me a second.
Okay.
I brought up the questions, but I couldn't bring up the book.
Okay, well, so would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
A lot of people ask why I use the M.E. Young. I think a lot of authors use a pen name for a variety of reasons, but just to say that many years ago, before our time, women weren't allowed to publish books.
It's true.
They weren't considered smart enough to do that, so they had to use a pen name, and it seemed to be a male name. So that's one of the reasons. There's a root there. There's my books about the seeds that the seeds in our minds and the seeds in our hearts and so on. Naked seeds, but that's part of it. And then my birth name is actually Elizabeth Young. So, and I never got to use that. So it's that. And then the wonderful children's book illustrator, my friend Jackie Ivanovic, who did the cover of the book, she has always called me M.E. in a very nurturing way. M.E. So there's a playfulness about it, and it has a history, and it's a root. It's a root for me that I didn't get to share before. So sometimes it's fun to rename oneself. I had a different name in the convent, and this is another name to share who I am, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, in that moment, I pulled up your bio here. So M.E. Young, her book is Naked Seeds, One Woman's Journey to Unearth What Was Silenced. And M.E. Young helps women and men give voice to personal truths that the religious patriarchy has silenced in the past. She nourished this freedom as a Catholic missionary sister, music minister, family planning clinic administrator, shaman, integrative massage therapist, visual artist, and author. Talk about a Renaissance woman.
Indeed.
She enjoys encouraging others on their healing journey, shares her wisdom with humor, and enjoys creating with paint, camera, or pen. We're so grateful to be able to continue our conversation. We were into some fairly deep stuff last time. We were talking about going through your spiritual and biographical journey, and you were sharing some spiritual insights along the way that had come to you. And I know at where we left off, we were talking about our interconnectedness and also about being able to be our authentic selves before God, before Christ, before our community, rather than trying to fit into a certain box. Do you want to pick up a little bit on where we were talking there about your finding your authentic self and where that was competing with the box that your church or community might have tried to put you in?
It's interesting because I think just today or yesterday, it's another sort of aha moment of how much being silenced, although it seemed subtle or seemed like the way you do things in a family or in a church at the time when I was younger, in the 50s and 60s and even in the 70s. And I realized, I was crying about it actually yesterday, because I realized that it really crippled my ability to make relationships with others of any kind. So in a way, I think that's probably why I have so many things in the book at different times in my life. My relationships in the convent, which was under obedience at first, and then having the freedom of Vatican Council II to move into a more inclusive, open sharing with my sisters that allowed it allowed all that silence to suddenly emerge into thoughts and things we didn't know about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, I shared last time, I think we wanted to go on to some of the other topics, but that at first, when I was there, the postulants had their place in the building. They had their place in the chapel, and they weren't supposed to communicate with the novices or then the next with professed sisters. Everybody had their little niche.
Mm-hmm.
So after Vatican Council II, we actually got to know each other, the sisters from other countries, those who'd been in the missions. We we were different. Divided into different groups that had different ages and different experiences, and even celebrated each other's birthdays, which was revolutionary.
Wow.
So in the convent, I mean, that's just one example of the silencing. But lately, I've been more aware just of how much I had to hide these sort of nothing bad really, but these things in the family that kept me from having relationships with friends, with at school, or having to. There was a sort of a nervousness on the part of my mother's somehow of being seen, and rightfully so, since she had an illegitimate child who was me, and trying to make sure that the breadwinner we had, the man she married, would stay and be there. So, so that's a simple way of saying it. But I think that it really also affected. We were talking last time. I started to think about this time talking about sacred desires. You had a question about that, and you brought up the LGBTQ community and the inclusiveness that is being threatened. And I would say also, in the one thing I did in the 70s was to be an administrator of a family planning abortion clinic. So this is a powerful time for all of us, but for me particularly, it's sad. And also I have a tremendous respect for what everybody has done, men and women, to create more services between then and now, so that even though there are restrictions coming into play, there are still more professionals and more women who understand the importance of women's rights, for example. They'll find a way to take care of each other and to take care of their patients. We'll find a way again. And so I have faith in that, and because I've seen it before. It was even that way in the 70s. But you celebrate what was there. And we were told by all of us, it was 150 of us that went to Washington from all over the country, from clinics, and the NARAL president at the time, the first thing she told to us was, abortion will be illegal again. And we all just roared, what? We've done all this work. But she explained the same thing I just did. If there's enough people knowing how to care for each other, how to care for women, the whole, just in being in a woman's body, everything from taking care of it and knowing what your parts are and taking good care of them and knowing how to use birth control if that's your choice, or knowing how to say no and having the right to say no, which is not respected all the time. So am I making any sense or taking this wrong direction?
Total sense. You could keep going.
It is. One thing I wanted to share is that this has happened before. This has happened before. So don't lose hope to whoever's out there. Don't, because you just, like we all did, we just kept going until there was a lot more a variety of resources, and women themselves started to become more educated. Not all women, obviously. There's certain belief systems, churches, whatever, family beliefs that still keep young people, men and women, young boys and girls, from knowing enough about their bodies. And one of my favorite things, of course, is this isn't a plug, but to watch the series from Britain, Sex Education.
Yes.
Because it just is so, well, it covers everything, but it covers everything in terms of relationships of different ages and challenges. But we need more of that kind of thing. That I had as my next question on the list you sent me about sacred desires, and how do we discover our sexuality at first? And all the people around us and their attitudes, and whether they say, oh, Grandpa does that to all the little girls and boys in the family, so we're just going to turn aside. Or I've heard these stories. I'm not just saying Grandpa. It could be anyone, where an adult takes advantage and there isn't enough education or support to say no is a big thing.
Right.
But also knowing your body, knowing what it means, what it feels like, what do you do with that energy? It's a powerful energy. It can be misused or used. So, yeah. So for me, I feel really blessed. You had asked, how did I first discover my sexuality? And it really was that blanket, because I didn't have any, so to speak, even in high school. I kissed a boy in the band instrument room in the lunch hour when another couple was in there for a little while until they discovered us. But after that, it didn't become. So he was a wonderful man, but he's the one that I shot the baskets over. He's a 7-foot tall guy, and I learned how to shoot basketball with his grip. So that was somebody who was a friend who also was a sports person that I enjoyed. But yeah, so I wanted to encourage people because, well, let's see, Kelly, Mark, I'm trying to think, you shared about what how do we deal with our feelings and stuff? And especially when a friend of yours might have voted differently. And I had a very
Or
long
in my
conversation
case,
with
it's a family member. Yeah.
sorry, family members.
No,
And I
don't
was
but that's right, how close to home it hits.
sure. And a woman who for the past few years, she and her husband lived in conservative Indiana. I'll say that. I'm
I
from.
know conservative Indiana.
You
That's where I'm
do.
from.
You
You're-
too. What city or what part?
I was born in South Bend.
And I'm from Chesterton, Indiana. So
Right. Right.
she's now in Fort Wayne, which is also the city where I was administrator of the clinic years ago. And she talked for hours, Leslie, about she just wanted to scream at people, and she knew she needed to contain that and not blame them. So she started doing her puzzles. She does puzzles, all kinds of puzzles. So she was going to do an M&M puzzle because she said, I can't go out and yell at people about this. That's not right. I can't yell at my daughter, my sister, whoever.
Yeah.
But she was fuming. And I'm glad. I think that's my example there is we all need to find a channel for our energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's say it's bad, not push it down because that's going to make us sick, not shoot somebody else because that's going to put us in jail. I mean, there's a lot of choices, and some people will try to choose those things. But I'm glad you shared some of how you're dealing with it because you were talking about the African bishop.
Oh, and a Desmond Tutu.
Desmond Tutu, yeah. I have a thing on my wall from Nelson Mandela. Never happened. And it just it always seems impossible until it's done.
I heard that quote the other day.
Yeah, I heard someone too.
quote
I
the other
just have it there because, okay.
It seems impossible until it's done.
Right.
And there's a lot of, especially because the recurrence here of repression.
Yeah.
And and not just politically in the masses, but in the churches again, too. Churches behind and supporting the kind of suppression that was there before in their choice of how to live their Christianity or whatever their religions is at the time.
Absolutely. So I have a question about that specific to you. I mean, so how do you practice your faith? Do you mind sharing how you do that these days?
Well, the simplest statement is that it's part of my everyday life. It's meeting somebody on the street or outside, some student that's in my apartment complex, that saying hello, because we have I know that sounds simple, but there's a lot of students here from different countries, from different colored skin, different choices, and different ages, some coming back to school. So and I'm the old lady from the college. There's a couple here that are my age, but this is a very sort of a mixed community that way. So just being friendly to them, saying hello, because you can tell they think they should be cheerful and not speak up sometimes. It sounds simple, but it's the Jesus I knew or came to know in my heart and mind, and what I learned from most of the people, that it was that being present to the moment. So, but I'm a member of 3 different churches. The Jewish Trinity, and I told you about that last time, because I wanted to learn more and sing. I wanted to sing this music, and I ended up singing it. When Zoom was in play because of COVID and no one could gather together, there were only 4 of us on Zoom singing the entire High Holidays. And that was a major gift in my life, to be able to do that. I'd never done it before. I didn't sing Hebrew before. But I loved singing. And Jesus was a Jew. And knowing something about that history, that language, and everything he practiced at that time, and then how he expanded his teaching to include more people. So I suppose that's the root answer to what you were asking me.
Thank you.
That's the Jesus I knew,
And you still know.
I still know. Yeah. And I also belong to a Lutheran church and a First Baptist church too. The ministers inspire me. Like I was a part of the Lutheran church in the past for a while, until they had to struggle with the GLBTQ issue. They were supposed to. I was not welcome there at the time, but I went back and just joined that purpose of saying, okay, they have changed.
So I'm assuming you're a part of a Lutheran church that is a part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, ELCA.
Yes, the LCA, huh?
Yeah, so the ELCA, which is, of course, affirming denomination.
Right.
So I thank you for explaining that your feet land in different faith communities. I am like you in that aspect. And so Kelly and I have a a friend of our program, Alicia Mack Crosby, or sorry, is it the backward? Alicia Crosby Mack, who she describes herself as being spiritually promiscuous. And I have taken that and used that.
Thank you.
For credit, but you fit that category too, because that's what works for me. I am in several different faith communities, and it helps deepen my faith, but also this is where I can connect in different ways. And I love that, where when some of them are traditional and then there are a couple that are not traditional. So part of that though is maybe it's because I was, for my own self, disconnected from my faith and any spiritual practice for a lot of years. And I was agnostic / ultimately angry atheist until things changed. But for you, in your experiences, both as a nun and being in that, and just your own journey and how you've reconnected to all of that, and you're still in these communities, that's really, that's hope, actually.
Well, it is. I think it is helpful for people. When I say it, they seem a little surprised. I mean, it's not like they talk about it all the time. But also, when I moved here to California, at that point, I was a lesbian. I had all of that. Actually, me, and I moved here for a relationship, which lasted about 2 weeks. But here I am, and I'm still here creating. And I became part of in order for finding resources for myself, the Stonewall Alliance here, which was a place for information and services for the community. The LGBTQ, at that time, it was something less than that. I call it the endless acronym sometimes, but anyway, all the different additions we've made over the years.
Yeah.
But finding resources, and I think I mentioned that maybe before, Alpha said, I feel like I'm part of your group, and I've been here forever. It's so comfortable. But they didn't have, when someone called in and wanted to know if there was a church that was accepting, that's what I wanted to share. There weren't any notes on that, and no one had done research. So that's what I did. I called all the churches in town, from the city, and asked questions enough to know where did they stand. And then I could put those who were accepting in a resource book.
Now, for context, because I don't think our listeners know exactly where you live, if you don't mind sharing, you're in Northern California, specifically in Chico, right? In Chico State University. So
Right.
Yeah, there's a pretty big university up there as well. And Chico, I know from years back in the 90s, and I think it's grown substantially from there. COVID probably brought that many more people up to Chico out of the Bay Area and other parts. So yeah, you're up there. And
well, we added, I don't know, 90,000 or something because of the fire in Paradise too.
Oh, that's right. Chico Paradise. Yeah, the Paradise fires.
A huge transition.
Yeah.
And the students, and I have an adopted spiritual granddaughter named Sonia, and she's Hispanic origin, and she's just finishing, after all these years that she's been here, and I've been blessed to know her. She has done a study on neurodivergence, which is again about inclusivity and offering resources for people who learn differently, who think differently. It's the wide range. And so I've been working on her with that and on her papers and more on the writing end. I mean, she's brilliant at putting it. So I learned a lot about that. And what I like about having her as my adopted spiritual granddaughter is just that, well, we like each other, but we can talk about anything. And she's in her 20s, and she really values my stories and what she could learn from that. But also, I learned so much about the challenges that their generation has and how afraid they are right now. Politics themselves and what that means. So I came here too because it's an arts community. There's just a lot of wonderful range of art. But back to the LGBTQ, because that is an issue again. If it always is, I guess, to be a little different. But one of the things I loved about that job, that volunteer job, was that different departments at the university called and asked for if they could have a panel of representative, like a bisexual, gay, lesbian, whatever, transsexual person to come to their classes. And I was able to organize that. And I was always one of the people in the crowd as well. And that was really wonderful it felt good to organize, but we had our own wonderful little group, and a lot of students were concerned about asking questions. And a lot of them were prejudiced because they had learned that. You could tell they just looked at us with disgust. But it was a wonderful experience to be out in that way and to have a group of us that were teaching, making it a little more hopefully inclusive and inviting people to, if they were hiding, perhaps, that they felt that there was a place to come. Am I taking this too long in a subjection.
You want to just take a second for our listeners to point out a resource that's currently available so that people don't have to do the work that you did of like calling up every church. There's a website called churchclarity.org. Are you familiar with this? Where they actually look at and review different churches that may, on their website, they may say everyone is welcome, but then they really get into, does everyone's welcome mean, we affirm you and are inclusive, or does it mean we love the sinner but hate the sin, and you're welcome anyway. They're broken, but you're welcome.
Yeah, that feels great.
But it's a good resource for someone who might be in that similar position. Like, hey, I'm new in town. I'm looking for I don't know which ones are going to really accept me or not. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for throwing that in there, Kelly. That's very true.
I'm really glad you did that too, because just one thing I learned a few years ago that there was the Baptist church, and then there was the Second Baptist church, and I think it's the Second Baptist church. I don't know. They can individually, each church, even though they're in a larger body, can choose who they take in and what some of their values are. I think it's the First Baptist Church because it's the wonderful minister here that I connect with in that church. But also I found the Alliance group of Baptists, the Alliance, which was near the Bay Area. I went to some of their services, and also I would actually attend in Tennessee in what's the famous city with the music. I'm blanking. Nashville, yeah. And the music was very different, but so inclusive, very different than the Baptist churches, other Baptist churches. So there is a welcoming there. And I'm so glad there's that resource that hopefully will help people find that.
Absolutely. So I have a question based on what you were just sharing. And you mentioned two things that reflect back on your time in the 70s. So you said first, the president of NARAL having the prescience to say that abortion and women's reproductive rights will be challenged and made illegal, as we've seen with the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Yes.
And now we see what's happening in certain states. That's incredible to think that she said that, knowing full well that actually did happen. Here we are. And then the second part is LGBTQ rights and the work that you were doing. And now it feels most recently that we could be seeing the same, that what the advancements that have been made, whether it was Obergefell, the ruling that legalized same-gender marriage across the country, or other things that protect queer folks in the United States, that they may be under threat. And I guess my question is, you've seen it before, but you said you have hope. So tell me about this hope you have. I need to hear about this hope and how this might relate to Jesus or something else. Like, tell me why you're hopeful.
Well, I've been around for a while, maybe a little longer than you two. No, it's true, but I think it's because I had this sense about Jesus that he met my relationship with him on the stories I know from the Bible and all, that he meets each person where they are. Okay. And there's many stories in there. Well, why are you talking to that guy? Why are you talking to who spoke to you? I think he talked to that one last night. He said, well, who touched me? Who called out to me? And it was a crowd of people. What are you talking about? But that sense of there are many of us, and even online, there are worldwide groups of, there are several specific Christian or even open religious groups that are specifically focused on publishing LGBTQ books and supporting gay marriage and inviting, across the country for that. And in terms of women's health and women's rights worldwide, there are, I wouldn't have time to even investigate or list them all, but that gives me hope because it's a worldwide acceptance and support of women's health and women's rights, and that's there, and that gives me hope. It's not going to be, there's enough energy in that, I guess, and enough women who, in their own way, maybe privately, are connecting with that support system, that they already have different ideas about Katie Valentine, who wrote the foreword to my book. She's in Ireland now, but she does worldwide things. She's a scriptural scholar, Christian scriptural scholar, who is helping men to join, but to know that it's okay for them to learn shamanic practices, to pray in different ways, if that's their calling, and still be Christian. Those kind of things are going on all over the world. So that's hope. Just that, and the more that people know that there are those resources, that they can do it privately online if they don't feel safe in their own community. So I think, I don't know about, the interesting thing is I find that the young people, you can hear in terms of LGBTQ, they take it for granted that they're safe, that they're okay, because it's like another generation. They don't have to fight for it. They didn't have to really hide that much.
Right.
But I think they're mistaken in that they just are taking it for granted right now. And they don't have, for example, I went down to say a little while ago to find out if they had anything for elders, for LGBTQ elders in terms of resources, whatever. And she looked at me and said, no, I don't think so. And literally, there's no sense of history, whatever there. And I don't know if that's all over, but certainly in Chico, that was the case. Because they think that they won their rights. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with this possible restriction, the different restrictions coming down, or judgments. Will they go back in silence, or will they do what a lot of us did in the 70s and picket, or do what we can do, right, or whatever our thing is, to try to make that change? And for me, it was the churches too, helping the ones I was associated with. Always meeting someone who was gay within the church who was hiding, Presbyterian, Baptist, back in the 70s again. And so we've made progress, but I think it is a time to be, unlike my friend doing puzzles instead of screaming at people. I think that we don't need to add to the energy, because I think we already can build our community, and the hope is in what we believe in and sharing with each other, and having groups that are supportive, and finding those wherever those might be around the world, even if it needs to just be online for a while. But not to shrink and go back and say, I need to be silent.
Well said. So bringing back Desmond Tutu. So one of the quotes that I heard echoes what you were saying. It is, do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world.
Yes. Yeah, we don't have to be loved by everybody, but we can have a strong network. It just reminded me of the fishing nets from, well, Jesus wasn't a fisherman. He was in the boat. I don't know how much fishing he did. I'm kind of the supervisor.
Yeah, he was kind
of supervisor.
Is it like a consultant?
Yes.
No, there you go.
Net over there.
Let's take time to pray or whatever.
One issue that comes up for me a lot in conversations with, because I have feet in the conservative world and in the progressive world, is that there are a lot of folks. I mean, there are a lot of folks on the progressive side who can't quite conceive of how conservatives see the world. But there are a lot of people on the conservative side who are like, I don't know how you get from here to there. Like, I don't know how you can be a Christian and support abortion rights, or I don't know how you can be a Christian and be gay and inclusive. And we've done entire shows about the theology of let's unpack what Romans 1 is really about. Let's unpack the scripture. But we could do hours worth of conversation on that. But do you run into that in conversation with people where people are like, how can you be a Christian and and trying to help lead people, or at least show them the logic of like how to get from here to there?
The thing that comes to mind so often that I guess I've done pretty, it's worked for me to do what I think it's like being like Jesus, what I learned. I try to be really present to whoever I meet, and have a sense of humor, but be interested in who they are or something about them. Like when I went to get an eye exam and there was a new young woman testing me. So I asked a couple questions, and it was a wonderful experience because, of course, they're more present to you. And when you find out what they love, what they're all about, whoever it is, a stranger that you're meeting. And I think the thing with the Jesus, or with how to be a Christian, I've found it most useful, is to ask them to tell me about Jesus. What is it like to be a Christian for them? How do they show their belief in their lives? And I listen. And then I find that seed, because I like to talk about seeds, and then that seed of what seems really important to them. And then I said, well, tell me about what, if they're a Jesus person, I say, well, tell me, what did Jesus do about that? What stories do you remember? So it's more like, for me, I listen to where they're at, and then I can get excited and plug in, because really the core of the stories is common most often. Does that make sense? Oh, I'm making sense of that.
Yeah, very much.
So rather than trying to tell somebody, but to get them in conversation first, and then if they bring something up, I can say, well, I saw this wedding of these two women, and it was wonderful. And one of them had the rabbi come from San Francisco, and the other one was Catholic, and she wanted me to sing the Ave Maria. And people listen to these stories because they're unique, and it's about God and it's about churches, right? I'm not making it up. They're true stories. But then it connects with their own, maybe it's about their own church. I said, oh yeah, your church, I did this once. So it's
Right.
it's a weaving together what we each might have, the common ground. It's the common ground frame. Not try to change somebody, but can we find that common ground that we could appreciate it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's consistent with what some surveys have shown, which is that regardless of someone's position on the conservative to progressive spectrum of Christianity, that people who know someone who is gay or transgender are much more likely to be inclusive than
Yes.
people who aren't.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with stories, with knowing people's stories, knowing people one-on-one. And I'll say, I've even seen this in my family and in conservative communities that I've been in, where if we're talking theoretically about, like, let's talk about that community, that there's a lot of like kind of party line discussion. But when we're talking about people we know, like
Yes.
Bob and Steve, the neighbors across the hall, who are always really kind and bring us casseroles, the conversation is different.
Yeah.
Because now we're talking about real people who we love, who, if hard pressed, we could have to say, like, I think God loves Bob and Steve. I mean, they're really kind and they're nice, and
Yes.
they yield good fruit.
Yes.
So, and that's always been a source of hope for me, that there are still even people who support restrictive policies in real life, in practical practice. When confronted with real people, they do the right thing.
Well, at least they have less fear of exploring that different reality, because it's about an independent person. They're about something they can identify with. That's what I'm here. And that's what I find too. And it's, yeah, it's interesting you said the two guys there. It's because when I came to town, I was a member of the ELCA church in Minnesota. At the end of my time there, just before I moved to California, that church had a membership of 400, and I joined this officially as 401 because we were going to vote. A woman minister there had been there for 17 years. She was in a committed relationship with a woman for 13 years, but the oral body would not ordain her because of their values. So after many years of trying to go through the proper channels, this particular congregation chose to go ahead and ordain her anyway. They took a vote. We all voted yes. With the invitations in, it was like the multiplication of the loaves, because with 400 people, not enough room with all the people who wanted to come and celebrate this from all over. So we had to go to a larger Lutheran church, and there were over 1,000 people. There were people outside. 5 bishops came from around the country to ordain her.
Wow.
So I just share that as another example, like you said, to know the person, the people, to know a real story that happened, and that's a powerful one for me. So I came here thinking, the ELCA is open to, but since I was working for Stonewall and knowing some of the prejudice too, I asked the church. I said, well, is this church open to GLBTQ? And the person said, well, there's John and John. And I said, oh, yeah, and they're on the board, and we really like, they've been here for many years. That was it. and they were it. So it took me and a lot of people there to try to, well, they were supposed to do this bishop assigned thing of journey faithfully through sexuality, study for the whole congregation, the whole DLCA. But they hadn't done that yet. I was supposed to be part of the team, and when it came time for that to meet, they did not contact me to attend. And so I went to the first meeting, and the reader filibustered on Paul, and I don't know what he was saying, because it had nothing to do with the topic. And I tried to raise my hand, and he wouldn't listen. So by the end of it, I just slammed my fist down, which I never do, usually. And I said, we have to talk about this. They said, we don't have time for like 5 minutes. Well, what happened is that 65 people had walked in there to be part of this. People I had served as a singer, as an assistant minister, teaching their kids, teaching women's Bible for a couple of years while I was there. And they all walked past me at the end. I just sat there and they all walked past, except the woman sitting next to me. So I thought, okay, I'm done here until something happens. So 4 or 5 years later, I was with another church, the Unitarian Church, and who was also working toward becoming a welcome congregation with much more open and supporting people. But so I was part of that. And the ELCA church invited a celebration of the LGBT community because they had gone through their homework. So I went and represented the other church. So it was really cool to watch that. It took 6 years, but I think because some of us spoke up and eventually, and they knew a lot of us who were part of the community. We didn't just think, oh, well, John and John, maybe. Whoever John and John.
So as we're wrapping up again, we could keep going on. You just have your history and shed so much light of hope. But also my takeaway from our conversation is that it's really important to share stories, right? This is what builds out that. I was introduced to the concept of discussed theology and discussed theory recently. And it's disgust is a visceral reaction, but it's really rooted in fear and also not knowing.
Yes.
Right? It simply is not that, because once we know, then it can easily slip away and make a connection, just like what you were sharing and what Kelly, you've shared as well of my own experience, that when we see somebody that's no longer other, but is somebody that is, as we're called in our own faith, to be radically inclusive and to know them for who they are as a divine soul, a divine being, welcome them like we would Jesus, right? Then that totally changes the narrative of what we're discussing. So that's a thought.
I was just going to say, I think also it's important when we want change to let go of the shoulds.
Right?
Trying to make each other see the truth of the right thing or whatever. It doesn't work. There has to be a connection with where people are. And that's the kind of respect I've learned, that just be present. And so to me, that's the Jesus passage of Jesus, like us, have learned about. But to really listen, you do what you want to do, but you don't have to change somebody's whole life or tell them they should do that to support this group or that group. Find the common ground. Yeah, but you talked about that. I think we just need to find the common ground and respect it and not think we know better because we're more accepting of somebody or some group.
Beautifully said.
I love talking with you guys. You can always cut me off if you question.
Well, we do have another guest waiting in the
Yes,
lobby,
well.
but I do want to at least remind our listeners to look for your book, Naked Seeds, One Woman's Journey to Unearth What Was Silenced, and to come and find you on the web at www.meyoungcreator.com so they can connect with your work. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with folks to let them know what they're in for when they are going to check out your book or your work?
Well, it's a combination. You don't have to read it from cover to cover. It's a combination of poems, lyrics from songs that I wrote, sermons that I wrote about inclusivity. Sorry, I'm spacing that church, but anyway, too many connections. So just you can open it, see how it speaks to you. There's also self-help things in there. There's the sex education piece, a few sex education suggestions about how to celebrate your own sexuality and maybe how to better have a little bit better relationships. And it's a combination of, it is seeds. So it isn't meant to change your life, but if it does, that would be great, because I think that the thing I want most is that you love yourselves and listen and honor your own paths, but be willing to encounter others and listen to what they have to say as well. So that hopefully together, that's the inclusivity. We don't have to change ourselves, but just be respectful to each other.
That's great. I'm ordering a copy as we speak.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for spending time with us. We'd love to have you back sometime soon.
Yeah.
It sounds
Oh, well,
more to talk about. So
just let me know. I feel so comfortable with you guys. And
Thank you.
I love your radical love. Absolutely. That's a perfect name for your
That's
live.
thank you so much. Well, we'll talk with you soon, and God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Radical Love Live, hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. Recorded at the Bravery Studios in Garfield, New Jersey. All rights reserved. Find our episodes on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And check us out at radicallovelive.com, along with our personal websites at markdilcom.com and kellywilson.com. This is Radical Love Live, where we explore faith outside the boxes.
If you've ever deconstructed your faith, you know it's not easy. But just imagine if you could have people to guide you through your process. People like Jim Palmer, Kristen Dumais, Jennifer Knapp, Brad Jerzak, Brian Zand, Paul Young, and more. Well, if you head over to www.choiracademy.com and register for Square 2 using the promo code RAD, you'll get 10% off the regular registration cost of this awesome course and community just for being a fan of our show.